asking each individual on your team, like, what treadmills are you on that you feel like, you don't really need to be on anymore? And what would you be doing with your time if you had that space freed up? So we were able to do that. And we're kind of in the midst now of making that all a reality.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Routines Podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Potter, and in this podcast, I talk to marketing leaders at the top SaaS and software companies to learn about their workflows, processes, and tech stacks. In today's episode, I'm talking to Emily Triplett Lentz, who leads content at Calendly, which is a scheduling automation platform. So let's start by getting an idea of your general workflow, and we can go from there. From the moment you log on in the morning, what does a typical day look like for you?
Hi, first of all, thanks for having me. A typical day. I don't know that there is one, but I will say that every day, I started doing this at Calendly just because we're a scheduling company where, people are kind of thinking about their schedules and thinking about how to optimize them. I block off time on my calendar every morning that I call it prep time, but that's when I'm going through my emails, my Slack messages, Asana messages, and just making sure that everyone who, needs something from me or has a question for me, I'm getting back to them. I'm looking at my schedule for the day. I'm seeing like what moved around or maybe what needs to be rearranged if I'm double booked. So that's what I'm kind of using the first 30 minutes of my day to do. I'm checking Slack and Asana. That's where we live as a fully distributed team. And because I'm on the West Coast of the US, often there will be stuff waiting for me because of the team members I have on the East Coast. We have like kind of a balance between synchronous and asynchronous work, a lot of meetings because we are a meeting company, but also just a lot of, going back and forth in Slack and Asana and whatnot. But my team, the content team, and really the whole marketing team does live in Asana. We organize all of our campaigns in Asana, all of our short-term and ongoing projects there. And it's really our team's tool of record for anything we've got going on.
Nice. In the last quarter, what marketing strategies or campaigns did you prioritize?
The content team specifically, last quarter, we were taking a pretty hard look at what we could automate or outsource or stop doing or enable another team to take care of for themselves so we weren't a blocker. Marketing is evolving so fast and content marketing along with it, I think especially with advancements in AI. And so we needed to kind of take a good hard look at what we were doing and ask ourselves, is this what we still need to be doing? So we spent a lot of time last quarter, like figuring out, all right, what are the things that we could try to automate? What are the things that I or a person on my team, a strategist doesn't need to really be spending their time on? And we just created a list of those things as a team. And then we asked ourselves, all right, if we were able to, hire contractors to help with that, if we did decide like, actually, this isn't a priority anymore, and we're just not going to do it, what are we going to fill our time with? And we really, that's going to be different for every company. And I can get into what it looked like for us, but I really think it's just a matter of getting your whole team together, asking each individual on your team, like, what treadmills are you on that you feel like, you don't really need to be on anymore? And what would you be doing with your time if you had that space freed up? So we were able to do that. And we're kind of in the midst now of making that all a reality.
That's great. I have two follow-up questions because you mentioned AI and outsourcing, which is obviously a hot topic right now and really valuable for marketers because you can spend more time working on the creative side and automating all those like mundane, tedious tasks to take up your schedule. So I guess my first question for you is, what are some things that you automated and what has that meant for your team? Like, how much time did you save, or did it help with morale because they didn't have to do things that maybe they'd find boring or tedious?
AI was part of it. It wasn't the only thing that we decided to automate. And AI has helped with some of that stuff. So for example, we've got a product marketing team, and on that team is a webinar team. They produce a lot of excellent webinar content. And on my team, where social media and video marketing sit, we were trying to figure out, like, is there a way to capture snippets from these webinars and repurpose the material from them for social. Now there are tools that can kind of help with that. They can help you like figure out like, oh, here's actually, just a little clip where someone said something interesting. We can turn it into an asset for social media. We can share it with that person so they share it with their networks, and we've just kind of like created new processes for ourselves, where before everything was sort of ad hoc and manual. With like writing, I would say we're still in the process of figuring out where it makes sense to insert AI into our editorial processes. And we are just getting started with an enterprise ChatGPT OpenAI account at Calendly, and our senior copywriter, Ronnie Barber, she created a custom GPT in that account that we're just calling Calendly Writer. And in that GPT, she just sort of uploaded all of the internal documentation we have around how we speak about Calendly to various audiences, and material from our website, everything that we've kind of created that can help train this GPT on, how we talk about Calendly from a marketing perspective. And that's already going, like, people are using that. Someone this morning was just like, oh my gosh, this, like event invitation, it would have taken me an hour before, and Calendly, it took me 15 minutes. It was so easy. I'm obsessed. And so like, we're just sort of starting to explore like, where are all of the places that we can plug this in and save ourselves time.
Amazing. And you mentioned content. So I would love to hear more about your content production process for like articles and blogs on this site, from the keyword research and coming up with your priority topics for the quarter, deciding what's worth going after, and then how you assign that out to writers if you work with freelancers or contractors, and how you get it up on the site from there, from the writing onwards.
Yeah, editorial content specifically, I feel like a lot of teams, we're taking we're assessing, like, is the playbook that has always worked still working for us? And I would say, like, we have pulled back somewhat on, just like creating lots of blog content, because that's not, in terms of Calendly's business, at least, like, that's not necessarily where the majority of our customer journeys are starting. So we're getting really specific about, like, what is the blog for? And when we create content for the blog, like, what warrants a blog post? We really try to inform our editorial calendar in terms of what's happening with the product. It's a very product-led business. And so we'll look at, all right, what's the roadmap? What's coming out this year? What are we launching? And then how do we create content that ideally also has search intent around these topics that are going to be relevant from a product standpoint? So for example, if we are launching some improvements to Calendly's extension, we might create content on the blog that's around like the usefulness of browser extensions and what they're for, and examples of some. And by the way, like, here's how Calendly's browser extension can help make your life a lot easier, etc.
What content marketing tools do you use to help with this process? Like, what do you use any kind of content optimization tools or anything else like that?
Yes. Well, like I said, Asana is definitely where we live. So we manage our whole editorial calendar in an Asana project. And we are, like I said, starting to experiment with using ChatGPT, definitely not to create content. I would advise strongly against that. But, can we use it to, for instance, if we're getting a draft from someone on another team, can we run it through there so that it edits that draft for AP style and according to our style guide before someone on our team takes a pass at it? So that's definitely a tool that we're looking at inserting into our processes. ClearScope has been in our stack for a long time, but yeah, I would say those are the main tools.
Amazing. And you mentioned before that you aren't pushing out as much content as far as volume wise, because that's not where your customer journey is starting. Where do you find your customers are first learning about Calendly, or at least the problem that they need the solution for, which is like a better way to schedule meetings? Where do you find the best channel is?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're putting out less content. We are just sort of adjusting the channels that we are optimizing for. So right now, we're seeing a lot of people learning about scheduling automation, not from organic search, but from their connections on social media. And so my team has been pretty focused on putting together what we're calling like creator-driven content. So how can we take a look at these various advocate audiences, our customers, our internal folks, the employees at Calendly, influencers, just general, brand advocates, and, use what they're already saying about Calendly and enable them to help share Calendly's brand message versus just sort of, putting everything out, broadcasting Calendly's brand message from Calendly's own LinkedIn handle, Twitter handle, etc. We get a lot more mileage out of, an individual at Calendly saying something about how Calendly works and interacting with their network, or one of our customers saying something and jumping in and getting involved in that conversation. And, oh, by the way, maybe we'll have you on a webinar and then you can take these clips and share them with your audience, et cetera. So we're just really seeing a lot more usefulness out of interacting with our audiences on those channels and in those ways.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because people obviously trust people versus brands more. So
more and more. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So is this influencer kind of partner marketing something that you see someone comment and you'll jump in there? Do you have a set process with it with your team where there's a system that they follow? Maybe they source out influencers, or how do you enable them to promote Calendly even more?
Yeah, so we have a wonderful senior social media manager, Serena McMahon, who's actually moving into more of an advocacy marketing role, and then we'll be hiring a social media manager to backfill her role. But right now, in addition to day-to-day social media management, she's also driving a lot of our influencer marketing efforts and had a major role in creating this creator-driven strategy alongside our video marketing strategist. And really, she's responsible for figuring out, all right, if we are working with these creators, if we are putting budget toward influencers, which ones make sense to work with given, our target personas and their audiences. It's involved. I would say it's really involved because you're working with individual people, and every single one of those people requires, a different contract and a different, they have a different way of doing things. But I will say it's definitely worth it. It's worth it. And that's why we're, expanding that and really doubling down on those efforts.
Other than Asana, unless you just use Asana, are there any tools that really help you to manage that, especially if it's a one-to-one type of thing?
Yeah. So I know we're moving to, there's a tool called Tagger that we use for influencer specific organizational efforts. And we're moving toward using Sprout's Sprout Social's feature for employee advocacy. So managing employee advocacy with the social media management tool that we're already using. So yeah, those are really helpful with regard to like social and advocacy and influencer marketing strategy.
Nice. And you mentioned your video marketing strategy a few times, so I'd love to dive into that more. I know a lot of brands want to do video, but they test different formats. It either doesn't perform, or on the other side, the video is expensive and hard to produce. So I'd love to hear more about, first of all, the types of videos you're making, what you found has worked, and the production process and the team around that.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously your company disagrees. We're recording this over video. You know the value. You know the value of video content marketing. Yeah, we have one video marketing producer / strategist right now. She's really working on figuring out, okay, like of all the video requests that come in, and there are many. It feels like every department across the company has some sort of need or use for video, from in-product video to CX video walkthroughs for the product to brand marketing video, et cetera. So she has her hands in all of this, but obviously as one person, she can't do it all. So we definitely have contractors that we work with for certain kinds of video. And she's been doing a lot of enablement recently. Like, okay, maybe this is just kind of a lo-fi loom video recording that we can polish and, add an animation with our logo to the end or an intro, something like that. And then she works really closely. She owns our YouTube channel. She works really closely with Serena on social, finding voice of customer clips and things like that to share across our different channels and, digging up content that creators unbidden have created about Calendly and saying, hey, thank you so much for creating this. Do you mind if we add this to our playlist on Calendly? And would you be interested in recording an update when we launch XYZ new feature, and sort of building those relationships? So yeah, kind of a balance between production work and strategy work.
Amazing. And you mentioned that you work with contractors and outside help sometimes. So when you have all of these marketing strategies and campaigns going, how do you decide whether to give the task to your in-house team, whether to hire a new in-house person to lead the project, if you're going into a new avenue, or whether to just turn to outside contractors or agencies?
Yeah. Well, obviously a lot of it depends on budget, just like what we have to work with. But I would say, because Calendly is such a product-led company that produces a lot of product-specific content, we really do try to keep the majority of that in-house, and where we find it most beneficial to work with outside creators is where we can be a little more product agnostic, a little more brand forward, a little, higher in the funnel maybe. But when it comes to involved feature specific content, whether it's video, editorial, social, whatever, it really makes the most sense to have someone in-house handling that.
Right, that makes sense. All right, so I'd love to talk about what's coming up next. So what marketing strategies or channels are you prioritizing in the upcoming quarter, and why did you decide on those ones?
Yeah, so like I was saying, we spent a lot of time last quarter figuring out, hey, if we were to remove XYZ work from our plate, what would we add to it? So we're looking at like I said, the creator-driven strategy and what that means, and, kind of partnering with our customers and influencers, et cetera, and employees to, create and distribute content around Calendly's brand message. We're looking into, rather than focusing as heavily on organic search, how we can increase content's efficiency. So, experimenting with adding different kinds of forms to our site, and what does that do? And, testing other kinds of inline assets in long form content, looking at more interactive content or reports or infographics and things like that, versus just like thinking of everything as like, is this a video, is this a blog post, etc. Getting more creative and experimenting with that. We, as part of the efforts to like examine like, all right, what if we had this room, what could we add? We had like a week of intensive AI learning just on the content team. We called it our AI summit. And we just took a week basically where we, designed a curriculum as a team, watched a bunch of webinars, listened to a bunch of podcasts, experimented with a bunch of different tools, played with the tools that we did have access to, and came together every day, had at least a, half hour of synchronous time where we were talking about what we learned that day and how we might apply it to our work here at Calendly. And then at the end of the week, the goal was to have like 2 or 3 recommendations. Like right away, we know, we want to implement this. And we did that. And we really, that's kind of a big part of how Calendly came around to purchasing an enterprise open AI plan. Is just like, what, this is actually the tool that we need, and we need to be able to design our own custom GPTs within this, and have a single source of it versus like tiny, a lot of people having their own individual accounts. Like, let's create this Calendly writer GPT, so everyone creating content at Calendly is like taking our style guide, et cetera, into account. And that was so useful that we're going to be doing that, a couple times a year. We've got our next one scheduled for next month, and we're probably going to start calling them like innovation summits versus AI. So, it's not just AI, but it's like, what new tools are out there? How can we be optimizing our processes? What do we need to learn? What don't we know? What are we feeling intimidated by that, like, after playing with for half a day, like, we feel a lot more confident about? So that was really valuable. I'd recommend every marketing team out there like dedicating some time to just like ongoing education, learning and development, because the field is just evolving so rapidly right now that if you don't carve out that space, like you kind of risk being left behind.
That's a really great idea. And also, you risk getting left behind, but also I find personally, I'm always intrigued by all these ChatGPT prompts I see. So I'll test it one time and then forget about it. So I feel like I waste a lot of time just churning through all of these different ideas. So I love how you created like a dedicated week to figure out what's actually important, what will actually help you guys, and then deciding on the few impactful ones to go forward with. So I love that idea.
Yeah. The deciding on a few impactful ones, that was key. Cause I think like out of that week, we probably had 100, 200. I did like, we could do this, we could do that. But then you end up just kind of diluting those efforts. And really it's like, okay, no, here's what we're committing to. Here's what we're recommending. We're going to, really build this into our processes to where it becomes second nature. It's just the default. It's what we do here. And then we'll have another one of these weeks and, figure out, all right, what are we going to add to? But trying to like just maximize everything that's available all at once, you wouldn't be able to get to anything. You'd overwhelm yourself pretty quickly.
That's a great idea. So my next question for you is, where do you turn to for marketing knowledge and news, or communities or groups that you are a part of to network with other marketing professionals?
Yeah, for sure. Content specifically has some wonderful resources. The Superpath community is the one that always comes first to mind. There's a wonderful Slack community where it's really, anything you need to know about content marketing that, you can't really Google, just go there, and someone in that group has most likely dealt with it and can help you out. And it's just a wonderful space to meet other content marketers and, people kind of wrestling with the same things you're wrestling with. That's a fantastic community. And there's other resources as well, podcasts, AMAs, webinars, etc. So definitely recommend checking out Superpath. John Bonini's content is wonderful. He's got Some Good Content is the name of his business. His newsletter is now called Louder Than Words, as well as his podcast. He gets, which I was just on that as well, but he gets some other like really heavy hitters on there. That just I always learn something listening to that podcast as well. Tracy Wallace's newsletter, which is called Contentment, comes out every week, I believe, and it's fantastic. So yeah, those are like the content specific resources that spring immediately to mind. Marketing in general, Emily Kramer and what she's doing with Market One, definitely recommend subscribing to that. Maven has some great marketing content right now. My favorite marketing newsletter, which it's mainly about like brand messaging, but our CRO, Jessica Gilmartin, turned me on to this guy. Jared Blank writes it. It's called Gobbledy. And sometimes it's kind of not safe for work, but it's teardowns of marketing strategy and, or not always teardowns. He'll say like what he admires about what companies are doing. And it's always just like really funny and provocative. And I recommend subscribing to that as well. It's called Gobbledy.
Gobbledy. Awesome. We're going to list everything.
But honestly, I would say like most of what I learn comes out of just having one-on-one conversations with peers. Like, hey, we're in the same space, like we should get on the phone. Like, I'd love to hear what you're doing. Happy to share more about what I'm doing. And like, that's where I would say like most like networking value, especially if you're in a remote company. Like you just have to like get outside and talk to people, and just reaching out to folks on LinkedIn and being like, hey, like, would you ever want to talk shop? I'm not selling anything. I really just want, peer to peer, like, let's have a chat. And a lot of people are very, are in the same boat. And so they want to do that as well, but they're, also generous with their time, and you get a lot out of those conversations. So, and I even have a few that are just like recurring, every quarter or so I'll catch up with an old colleague or someone just, who I have time set up with. And, what are you working on? What are you working on? And that's incredibly valuable.
It's a really great idea. So you just reach out to people that you don't already know on like LinkedIn if you're in the same space?
Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes, or, like we'll be connected through Superpath or through, someone else you work with, and you can just be like, hey, can you intro me to so-and-so who you worked with? And it's just such a high value way to like connect with someone versus, like attending an in-person networking event where you don't know anybody. And it's, yeah. And going in with like, here are the things that are on my mind and that I want to talk about and that I want to ask you about, versus just like, so, hey, how are you? What are you working on? Like going in there with an agenda is always a good idea as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And you mentioned Superpath, which is one of my personal favorites. We just started a partnership with them. So in the next month, we'll be pushing out content on the Superpath platform. So Thanks for mentioning that. Yeah. Look out for it.
Will do.
So my final question for you, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. You shared a lot of really interesting things, and we're going to link everything in the show notes, especially all the communities and newsletters you mentioned. But my final question is, what company do you admire their marketing or admiring them from afar? And they would be a good guest on this podcast so you can learn how they do it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big fan of Zapier. I think they put out a lot of great marketing content. It's funny. I'm content buds with Lane Scott Jones, who runs their content program there. Who I think I just reached out to her and was just like, hey, we should be friends. And we regularly chat now. But she does so much with like such a lean team, and I think it's worth talking to her. It's worth listening to some recent stuff she's recorded about. Just the massive ROI they get out of the content they publish. Huge fan of what Zapier is doing. And then just like any company that's like not afraid to lean into the conversation that people are having about their product or the space in which their product exists. Like even if parts of that conversation are not flattering to their product. And Jared Blank, the writer of the Gobbleding newsletter, he talks about that a lot. Just like the technique of, maybe it's not for you, but if it is for you, then you're part of the club. And Oatly is a brand that does this. Like it's an oat milk brand, but they have like very clever copy on their packaging, and they do really cool stuff, just like convincing the people who like them that they're part of something bigger. And they'll call that out by like, leading with a negative review, like, this tastes like bleep, yuck, or whatever it is. And then they'll have copy about like, a lot of people don't think that, and the people that do, that's fine. Like, do your thing. This is for the people who think oat milk is delicious. So I'm just a huge admirer of the bravery of that tactic.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. And like I said, we'll have everything linked in the show notes, and you can check out what Calendly's doing. I'll link everything they have going on in the show notes as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jenna. It was a pleasure.